Today, you will know the complete story of the Second Book of Chronicles in a way that you may have never seen, without filters and without nonsense. Stay until the end, and I am sure that the story of this powerful book will change something in your life. If you believe that this is not just a book, but God wanting to speak with us through His Word, comment now before we begin. I want to hear the voice of God in the Second Book of Chronicles. And let us go to the Word. The reign of Solomon began with expectation and tension. David, the man after God's own heart, was dead. The crown now rested upon the head of a young king, still inexperienced, but carrying the weight of a promise. He would rule the people of God. But before conquering kingdoms or raising palaces, Solomon knew that he needed to do something deeper, to seek God. And he did not do this in secret or in the silence of his quarters. He summoned all Israel, the chiefs of the tribes, the leaders of the families, the military commanders, an entire people moving with one purpose, to find the presence of God. They went up to Gibeon, where the tabernacle of Moses was still standing. It was the old place of meeting between God and the people built in the days of the desert. The Ark of the Covenant, the supreme symbol of the divine presence, had already been taken by David to Jerusalem. But the bronze altar, that same one where so many generations offered sacrifices, remained there. Solomon approached, and at that altar, before the whole congregation, offered 1,000 burnt offerings. 1,000. It was not just a religious gesture, it was a declaration. God, I need you more than armies, more than gold, more than victories. That night, God answered, not with thunder, nor with an earthquake, but in a dream, direct to the heart of Solomon. And what God said echoes through the centuries. Ask what you want, and I will give it to you. Solomon did not ask for wealth, nor revenge against enemies, nor fame. He asked for wisdom, wisdom to judge, to govern with justice, to lead the people of God with understanding. And it was there that the destiny of Solomon changed. God not only granted his request, but went further. Since you did not ask for riches nor long life, I will give you all this too. Wisdom, yes, but also honor, glory, and riches, like no king before you. The young king returned to Jerusalem and did not return the same. He was no longer just the son of David. He was now the chosen one, the blessed one, the king that God had equipped to build something eternal. Solomon had already received wisdom from above. Now it was time to act, and his first great project as king would not be military, nor political, it was spiritual. He decided to build a house for the name of the Lord, the temple that his father David dreamed so much of, but that God had reserved for him, the son. But Solomon did not want to just raise a building. What he planned was majestic, worthy of the God who made the heavens and the earth. A structure where gold, silver, bronze, and precious stones would reflect not only beauty, but reverence. And along with this, he would also build a royal palace. For to reign with wisdom requires balance between devotion and government. Soon, the king began to mobilize the kingdom. He designated 70,000 men to carry materials, 80,000 to cut stones in the mountains, and 3,600 supervisors to coordinate the work. An army of workers moved not by conquest, but by adoration. But he knew that for something so grand, he would need external help. So, he wrote a letter to Hiram, king of Tyre, the same one who had been a friend of David and had provided him with cedar wood. Solomon did not appeal to force, nor to authority. He spoke with honor, respect, and clarity. He explained his mission to build a house for the Lord, a temple where incense would be burned continuously, where loaves would always be on the table, where burnt offerings would be offered according to the eternal commandments of God. He described the project with details: great, extraordinary, because the God of Israel is greater than all gods. And even recognizing that heaven and the heaven of heavens cannot contain the glory of God, Solomon still wanted to erect that temple, not to limit God, but to worship him. In the letter, Solomon made a request, and that Huram send him a talented craftsman, someone versed in working with gold, silver, bronze, iron, fine fabrics and carvings, and also requested the sending of wood from Lebanon, cedars, cypresses, and sandalwood, noble trees that only Tyre possessed in abundance. As payment, Solomon offered wheat, barley, wine, and olive oil in large quantities for the workers of Huram. Solomon took a census of the foreigners who lived in Israel, as David had done before him, and designated them for the heavy work of construction. It was the beginning of something monumental. And then the day arrived. The project that began as a promise in the days of David and that now lived in the heart of Solomon finally left the paper. Solomon began the construction of the house of the Lord, the location Mount Moriah in Jerusalem, the same place where God appeared to David and where he had bought the threshing floor of Ornan, the Jebusite. It was not just any land. It was a space marked by sacrifice, mercy, and meeting with God. It was the second day of the second month, in the 4th year of his reign. Everything was ready. The dimensions of the temple began to take shape: 20 cubits wide, 60 long, imposing, symmetrical, planned. The entrance porch had a grandeur of its own, covered with gold and detailed with precision. Solomon did not economize. Pure gold was used in almost all internal elements. He covered the beams, the walls, the ceiling, and even the doors with gold. But it was not just luxury. Everything was adorned with carved cherubim, celestial figures that pointed to the sacred character of the place. In the heart of the temple, Solomon built the Holy of Holies, the most holy place. It was a square space, completely covered in gold, and where the Ark of the Covenant would stay. 2 large figures of cherubim of olive wood were carved and covered in gold. Their wings extended from wall to wall, occupying the whole space. It was an imposing vision. Angelic figures guarding the place where God would manifest. The curtains, made of fine linen, dyed with blue, purple, and crimson, were embroidered with cherubim, symbols of reverence, purity, and mystery. At the entrance of the temple, Solomon erected 2 gigantic columns with 18 cubits of height. Each one received a name. The first, Jachin, he establishes. The second, Boaz. In him is strength, more than pillars. They were silent declarations of what would sustain that temple. The firmness and strength coming from God. And so, stone upon stone, gold upon gold, symbol upon symbol, the house of the Lord began to rise not just as a work of architecture, but as a place of meeting between heaven and earth. With the walls raised, Solomon turned his attention to what would fill the interior of the house of the Lord. The sacred utensils, objects that would not only decorate the temple, but would serve the worship of the living God. The first great work was a gigantic tank of bronze. Its name, the Molten Sea. It was not called a sea for nothing. It was enormous, with 5 cubits of height, 10 of diameter, sustained by 12 oxen of bronze, arranged in groups of 3 facing each cardinal point. The tank was round, smooth, with a border similar to that of a chalice, and with figures of flowers carved around. It served as a reservoir of water for the purification of the priests. It was, at the same time, functional and symbolic. Purity, greatness, reverence. Besides it, Solomon ordered the making of 10 smaller bronze basins placed on carts with wheels that could be moved. 5 were placed on the south side and 5 on the north side. In these, the utensils of the sacrifices were washed. Also, 10 lampstands of gold were molded in accordance with the original model of the tabernacle, and 10 tables for the bread of the presence, 5 on each side inside the sanctuary. The gold shone in every corner. Solomon ordered 100 gold basins and organized the space with exactitude. Each piece had a clear function. The basins, the forks, the vessels, the recipients for incense. Everything was thought for continuous adoration. And in the external atrium, he built the great altar of bronze, the place where sacrifices would be offered. He placed around an internal patio for the priests and another external one for the people, with doors also covered with bronze. The man behind all these works was Huram-Abi, the craftsman sent by Huram, king of Tyre, master in working with metals, full of wisdom and ability. It was he who molded, carved, refined. Everything was done with excellence and in quantity so great that the weight of the bronze could not even be measured. The works of bronze were cast in a plain called Zeradatha, in the region of the Jordan. Between Succoth and Zeradatha, there was clay in abundance, ideal for casting molds. The works were finished, everything that Solomon had dreamed. Each stone, each column, each piece of gold now served to form the house of the Lord. But a construction, however beautiful it may be, is still just structure until God is in it. And this was the moment. Solomon gathered the elders of Israel, the leaders of the tribes, the chiefs of the families. Jerusalem filled with representatives from all over the kingdom. It was time to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles, and there was an even greater reason for that multitude to be gathered. The Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, which was in the city of David, would be taken to its definitive place, the Holy of Holies. The Levites prepared themselves. The priests consecrated themselves, and the procession began. But this was not a simple change of place. It was a sacred ceremony. The Ark, covered in gold and guarded with zeal by generations, was carried with reverence. Around it, a sea of sacrifices. There were so many oxen and sheep offered to the Lord that no one could count. The people celebrated. The Levites sang. The priests followed with solemnity. It was the heart of the nation being delivered to God. When the ark was placed in the most holy place, behind the thick veil, between the golden cherubim, whose wings covered the sacred space, it rested, and there it stayed, with only the tablets of the law inside it, the same pact given to Moses on Sinai. As soon as the priests left the holy place, the temple began to fill. The Levites positioned themselves with cymbals, harps, lyres. 120 priests with trumpets formed one single voice with the singers. The music rose like incense to heaven. They sang, "The Lord is good and his love endures forever." And it was then that it happened. A glorious cloud descended upon the temple, so dense, so real, that the priests could no longer remain there to minister. The glory of the Lord had filled the house. The cloud of glory still hovered in the air when Solomon turned to the people. It was as if heaven were watching too. He went up to the bronze altar, which he had ordered to be built especially for that moment. Great, high, placed in the center of the patio, before the whole congregation of Israel. He lifted his hands to heaven, and then he spoke. First, he declared in a loud voice for all the people to hear that God had fulfilled everything that he had promised to David. The temple was standing, The ark was in its place, and the presence of the Lord had descended. But this was only the beginning. Solomon knelt, opened his arms, and began to pray. A long, solemn, intense prayer, which was recorded word by word, because in that moment he was not speaking only for himself, but in the name of the whole nation. He said, "Lord, God of Israel, there is no God like you, neither in the heavens nor on the earth. You keep the covenant and mercy with those who walk before you with all their heart." And then he asked for something great. Solomon recognized that not even the heaven of heavens could contain God, much less that temple. But even so, he begged that the eyes of God would always be turned to that place, and that the prayers made there would be heard in heaven. The prayer was extending. It was not just a prayer of celebration. It was an intercession full of examples and predictions. When someone sins against their neighbor and comes to the temple to swear innocence, hear from heaven and judge with justice. When Israel is defeated by its enemies for having sinned, if they turn to you and pray in this place, forgive and restore. When rain is lacking because of sin and the people cry out, turned to this temple, respond with mercy. If there is famine, plague, drought, locusts, war, any calamity, if someone prays turned to this house, hear, forgive, and heal. And Solomon did not forget the foreigners. He asked that even the foreigner who came from afar, seeking God and praying in this temple, be attended to, because the name of the Lord was greater than the borders of Israel. The prayer was rising like incense, and then at the end, Solomon asked, "Lord, rise up to your resting place, you and the ark of your strength. May your priests be clothed with salvation, and your saints rejoice in goodness." And with this he finished. The prayer had been made. The king was on his knees, the people in silence. Something was about to happen. Solomon was still on his knees, with his hands lifted to heaven, when heaven responded. Fire descended, not as a metaphor, not as a symbolic image. A real fire coming from above consumed the sacrifices and the burnt offerings on the altar. And soon after, the glory of the Lord filled the temple with such intensity that the priests could not enter. They stayed outside. The power of God had taken possession of the place. The people saw everything. They were face down on the ground, worshiping, proclaiming, "The Lord is good and his love endures forever." The adoration did not stop. The sacrifices began. Many, so many that the bronze altar was not enough to receive everything. Solomon consecrated the central patio as an additional space, because the communion sacrifices and the burnt offerings were too many for the main altar to support. 22,000 oxen, 120,000 sheep. The celebration was intense and lasted 7 days. All the people of Israel were present, a multitude that came from the entrance of Hamath to the river of Egypt. It was a feast, reverence, national unity before God. After these 7 days, they celebrated another 7 days of feast, specifically the dedication of the altar on the 8th day after this second cycle. Solomon dismissed the people, and the people went away happy and with satisfied hearts, because they had seen with their own eyes what God had done for David, for Solomon, and for Israel. In the quietness that followed the feast, God appeared at night to Solomon and said, "I have heard your prayer. I have chosen this place for myself as a house of sacrifice." And then God spoke about the future, not the glorious future, but the conditional future. He said that if one day times of drought, plagues, or judgment came, and the people humbled themselves, prayed, sought his face, and repented, then he would hear from heaven, forgive the sin, and heal the land. God declared, "My eyes will be open and my ears attentive to the prayer that is made in this place," and reaffirmed something important. Solomon and his descendants would have a place on the throne if they walked in the ways of God, but also warned, if they abandoned his commandments, if they served other gods, then the temple, which now shone in gold and glory, would be left behind. And the peoples would ask, "Why has the Lord done this to this land and to this house?" And the answer would be clear, because they abandoned the Lord, the God of their fathers. 20 years passed since the beginning of Solomon's reign. 20 years of works, conquests, planning, and faith. In this time, he had completed 2 monumental constructions, the house of the Lord and his own palace. Now, with the great structures raised and the kingdom consolidated, Solomon turned his attention to strengthening the cities around. He rebuilt cities that Huram, king of Tyre, had given him and established Israelites to inhabit them. He reinforced Tadmor in the desert and the store cities in strategic regions of his land, military centers, supply depots, bases for his chariots and cavalry. Solomon thought far ahead. He was organizing not only faith and adoration, but also the logistics and defense of the empire. Everything was well distributed. He ordered the construction of cities for chariots of war, garrisons for horses and fortresses in high places, in Jerusalem, in Lebanon, and in all the territory he dominated. Solomon left his mark. The kingdom was being shaped under his administration. As for the foreigners who lived in Israel, descendants of the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, and Jebusites, he organized them as servant workers in public works. As for the Israelites, he did not designate them for this type of forced labor. They became soldiers, officers, commanders and leaders over the projects and over the servants. Solomon also maintained the worship of the Lord with order and reverence, exactly as his father David had established. The priests did their turns. The Levites played and sang, and the gatekeepers guarded the gates of the temple, all according to the instructions that David had left. Nothing was done in an improvised way. Every detail of the sacred service, every task in the temple followed a standard faithful to what God had ordered through David. At the end of the chapter, Solomon did something curious. He went to Etzion-Geber and Elath, cities on the coast of the Red Sea in Edom. There, through a partnership with Huram, he sent ships to the sea, commanded by experienced sailors. These vessels went to Ophir, a rich and distant land, and from there brought gold, about 450 talents, an immense amount of wealth. The reign of Solomon was not only firm on land, now he began to dominate the seas. The fame of Solomon had crossed deserts, climbed mountains, crossed seas. The world spoke of him, of his wisdom, of his wealth, of a temple covered in gold, of a throne that seemed to have been carved by gods. And then, one day, she came, the Queen of Sheba, coming from a distant land, carrying caravans full of spices, precious stones, and much gold. She did not come just to see. She came to test. She wanted to know if everything they said about Solomon was real or exaggeration. Arriving in Jerusalem, she was received with all honor, and there, face to face with the king, she began to ask difficult questions, riddles, dilemmas, deep questions. And for each one of them, Solomon had an answer. But it was not only the wisdom that impressed her. She saw the palace. She saw the organization of the court, the way the servants dressed, how the cupbearers moved, how the burnt offerings were offered in the temple of the Lord. She was breathless and said to the king, It is true everything that I heard in my land about your wisdom and wealth, but I did not believe it until I saw it with my own eyes. And now I see that not even half of what they told me did justice to what I saw. Happy is your people. Happy are your servants who are always before you. Hearing your wisdom, then she blessed the God of Israel, recognizing that the Lord had chosen Solomon to reign with justice and love for the people, and gave him extraordinary gifts, gold in abundance, very rare spices and precious stones. Never were so many spices seen in Jerusalem as those she brought in exchange. Solomon gave her everything she wished and asked for, besides the usual royal gifts, and she returned to her land with her retinue, but marked forever by what she saw. Soon after, the ships sent with Hiram arrive from Ophir. They bring more gold, 450 talents, sandalwood and precious stones. With this wood, Solomon ordered steps for the temple and for the palace, besides musical instruments for the singers. Jerusalem shone. The wealth of Solomon was almost unimaginable. The text enumerates the annual gifts he received: gold, silver, fine fabrics, weapons, perfumes, horses, mules, a constant flow of treasures from neighboring kingdoms that came to recognize his greatness. Solomon ordered a majestic throne, covered with ivory and pure gold, with 6 steps, 2 lions beside the seat, and 12 more along the staircase. No throne like this existed anywhere else in the world. All the gold cups, all the utensils of the palace shone. Silver in Jerusalem was treated as common stone. Each year, the kings of the earth came to visit Solomon, bringing gifts, seeking advice, wanting to hear the wisdom that God had poured out upon him. And Solomon, besides being wise, was a strategist. He accumulated war chariots, horses imported from Egypt and other nations, and traded with the kings of the region. Solomon reigned for 40 years in Jerusalem. When he died, he was buried with his father David in the city of David. Solomon was dead, and with his death, the throne of Israel was empty. Now all eyes turned to Rehoboam, his son. The people gathered in Shechem, a historic city, place of ancient alliances, where the destiny of the nation seemed always to be decided. It was there that Rehoboam would be officially proclaimed king. But before the ceremony, a movement arose. A man named Jeroboam, who had fled to Egypt still in the days of Solomon, now returned. He did not come alone. He represented the tribes of the north, a multitude that carried a complaint choked for a long time. They approached Rehoboam with a direct proposal. Your father Solomon imposed a heavy yoke on us. Lighten this burden, and we will serve you faithfully. It was a decisive moment. The new king had the chance to win the heart of the people, or lose it. Rehoboam asked for 3 days to think, and then went to seek advice. First, he called the elders who had served with his father, experienced men who knew the people, the cycles of power, the paths of wisdom. They said, if today you are good to this people, if you treat them with kindness and respond with pleasant words, they will be your servants forever. But Rehoboam wanted more than diplomacy. So he turned to the young men who grew up with him, his companions of the palace, inexperienced, but bold, accustomed to power and comfort. And their advice was the opposite. Tell this people, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. If he punished you with whips, I will punish you with scorpions. 3 days later, before the multitude in Shechem, Rehoboam gave his answer and chose the voice of the young men. His tone was harsh, his decision inflexible. There was no negotiation nor empathy. He rejected the petition of the people, and there the kingdom cracked. The tribes of the north, indignant, responded with sharp words. What part do we have with David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Each one to your tents. Israel. Only the tribe of Judah remained loyal to Rehoboam. The others turned against him and made Jeroboam their king. Rehoboam tried to contain the revolt. He sent Adoram, the official who supervised the forced labor, but the people stoned him to death. Rehoboam fled to Jerusalem running. That was a revolt that he would not control with harsh words, nor with scorpions. Israel was no longer one. Rehoboam arrived in Jerusalem in a state of shock. The throne was his, but the kingdom was divided. 10 tribes had rebelled. The nation, once united under the glory of David and Solomon, now bled. The first reaction of the new king was what was expected from an insecure ruler: to prepare for war. Rehoboam gathered an army, 180,000 warriors, with the intention of marching against Israel, recovering the tribes and reunifying the kingdom by force. But before he could give a single order, God spoke. The prophet Shemaiah appeared with a direct message from the Lord. Do not go up to fight against your brothers. Return home. This division came from me. And surprisingly, Rehoboam obeyed. He suspended the war plan, gathered the soldiers, turned inward, and began to strengthen what he still had. Rehoboam rebuilt and reinforced fortified cities in Judah: Bethlehem, Etam, Tekoa, Beth-zur, Soko, Adullam, and others along his southern border. Strategic cities, high walls, stocked warehouses, prepared barracks. He armed the fortresses with shields, spears, and provisions, and installed military officials in each of them. The kingdom of Judah, although smaller, was becoming a defensive fortress. But then something unexpected happened. While Rehoboam was organizing himself in Judah, a spiritual migration began to happen in Israel. The priests and Levites, who had been rejected by Jeroboam, who now promoted cults to the golden calves and kept the people away from true worship, began to go down to Jerusalem. They left their cities, their fields, their lives in the north, because Jeroboam had forbidden them to serve the Lord. In the new Israel, there was no place for true worship, so men of God migrated to where the temple still was, and more. Many of the people from all the tribes who still sought the God of their fathers followed them. They also abandoned their lands and joined Rehoboam, sacrificing to the Lord in Jerusalem, as they had learned since childhood. This movement gave strength to the kingdom of Rehoboam. For 3 years, he remained firm in the ways of the Lord, walking in the example of David and Solomon. The chapter ends with a more domestic view of the king. Rehoboam had many wives and children, in total, 18 women and 60 concubines, who gave him 28 sons and 60 daughters. One more wife stood out: Maacah, granddaughter of Absalom. Her son, Abijah, was chosen as successor. Rehoboam was strategic. He distributed his children among the fortresses of the kingdom and gave them supplies, wives, and authority, consolidating his dominion over Judah and protecting the throne against future threats. 3 years. This was the time in which Rehoboam walked in the ways of David and Solomon. 3 years of stability, of true worship, of a kingdom in reconstruction. But after that, the heart of the king deviated. Rehoboam abandoned the law of the Lord, and with him all Judah. The people who had migrated to Jerusalem to seek the presence of God now followed the king in the opposite direction. The covenant was forgotten. And because the people distanced themselves from God, God allowed the enemies to approach. In the 5th year of the reign, Shishak, king of Egypt, marched against Jerusalem. He did not come with just any army. They were 1,200 war chariots, 60,000 horsemen, and a multitude of soldiers who came from Libya, Ethiopia, and other peoples allied to Egypt. It was an immense attack, brutal, impossible to resist. They conquered the fortified cities of Judah, one by one, and then surrounded Jerusalem. Rehoboam was cornered. In that moment, the prophet Shemaiah appeared again, and his message was clear. Thus says the Lord, "You have abandoned me. Therefore now I abandon you in the hands of Shishak." The word fell like thunder, but something unexpected happened. The leaders of Judah and the king himself humbled themselves. They recognized, the Lord is just, but this attitude changed everything. When God saw that there was sincere repentance, he spoke again through Shemaiah. "Since you have humbled yourselves, I will not destroy you completely. I will allow you to escape, but you will be servants of Shishak, so that you know the difference between serving me and serving the kings of other nations." Shishak entered Jerusalem not to destroy, but to take. He took the treasures of the temple and the royal palace, everything that Solomon had accumulated, including the gold shields that represented the glory of the old kingdom. Rehoboam ordered bronze shields to be made to replace them and placed them in the hands of the palace guards, trying to maintain the appearances of a glory that was now more of a memory than reality. Even so, because Rehoboam humbled himself, the wrath of the Lord turned away, and Jerusalem was not destroyed. The kingdom survived. Rehoboam reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city chosen by God. He was 41 years old when he began to reign. His mother was Naamah, an Ammonite. But even with the episodes of repentance, the heart of Rehoboam was never totally firm in the Lord. The last verses record that there were constant wars between him and Jeroboam. When Rehoboam died, he was buried with his fathers in the city of David, and his son Abijah assumed the throne. The reign of Abijah lasted only 3 years, but it was marked by an epic confrontation with Jeroboam, king of Israel. The two kingdoms, divided since the death of Solomon, were now face to face. Judah on one side, Israel on the other, each in battle position, each king with his army ready for war. Israel was numerically superior, 800,000 chosen warriors against the 400,000 of Judah, on the top of Mount Zemaraim, in the mountainous region of Ephraim. Abijah raised his voice. It was not just a military speech. It was a spiritual and historical declaration made before the two armies. He shouted, "Hear me, Jeroboam and all Israel. Do you not know that the Lord, God of Israel, gave the kingdom to David and his descendants by an eternal covenant? But Jeroboam, servant of Solomon, rebelled, dragged with him useless men, rose against Rehoboam, and Judah was young and insecure, too much to resist. Now you think of fighting against the kingdom of the Lord in the hands of the sons of David, despite being a huge army. Do you have golden calves as gods? You expelled the priests of the Lord and placed for yourselves priests like the other nations, anyone who wanted to pay. But we have the Lord as our God. The priests, sons of Aaron, are still with us. The Levites do the service as he ordered. Every morning and afternoon we offer burnt offerings. We light the lampstands. We burn incense. We place the consecrated bread. God is with us, and you do not fight against us, but against the Lord." While Abijah spoke, Jeroboam had already armed a siege from behind the army of Judah. It was an ambush. Judah was surrounded from the front and from behind. But the people of Judah cried out to the Lord, and the priests blew the trumpets. Then they shouted with strength, and in the exact moment of the battle, God defeated Jeroboam before Abijah. Israel panicked. Judah advanced with strength. The victory was overwhelming. 500,000 men of Israel fell on that day, one of the biggest casualties recorded in battle between the two kingdoms. Jeroboam never recovered. During the time of Abijah, he was weakened, and the Lord struck Jeroboam, who ended up dying. Judah, in turn, was strengthened. Abijah reconquered cities, Bethel, Jeshanah, Ephraim, and their villages. His position as king was consolidated, and his house grew. He had 14 women, 22 sons, and 16 daughters. The chapter ends saying that the rest of the story of Abijah, his words, his wars are recorded in the records of the prophet Iddo. After the death of Abijah, his son Asa assumed the throne of Judah, and with him peace returned to reign. During the first 10 years of his government, the kingdom was in silence, without war, without threat. And Asa took advantage of this time of calm to do what was right in the eyes of the Lord. He began a true spiritual reform in Judah. He tore down the altars of foreign gods that still resisted in the shadows of the kingdom. He broke the obelisks, the sacred poles, and the idolatrous altars. He cleaned the land of that which divided the faith of the people, not only destroyed, but also ordered that all Judah seek the Lord and keep the law, and with peace. Asa also fortified the cities. He ordered the construction of walls, towers, gates, and locks. He organized an army with shields and spears, choosing strong men, 300,000 from Judah with large shields, and 280,000 from Benjamin, specialists with bows and small shields. They were ready, but did not need to wage war yet, until one day the enemy came. From the south appeared Zerah, the Ethiopian, with an army of 1 million soldiers and 300 war chariots, an absurd number. They went down to Mareshah, ready to crush Judah. Asa marched with his army to the valley of Zephathah, and there in open field cried out to the Lord with a prayer that crosses the centuries. Lord, nothing is impossible for you. Whether with many or with few, help us, for in you we trust. In your name we come against this army. Lord, you are our God. Do not let man prevail against you. The battle began, and the Lord struck the Ethiopians before Asa and the army of Judah. It was a complete victory. Zerah and his gigantic army fled, and the men of Judah pursued them as far as Gerar. No strength remained among the Ethiopians. They were crushed. The soldiers of Asa collected an enormous spoil. They plundered neighboring cities, attacked camps, took sheep, camels, wealth. Then they returned to Jerusalem in triumph. The victory against the Ethiopians was still fresh in memory when the Spirit of God came upon Azariah, son of Oded, a prophet little known, but sent with a decisive word. Azariah went to meet King Asa, and the message was clear as fire. Asa, listen. All Judah and Benjamin, listen. The Lord is with you while you are with him. If you seek him, you will find him. But if you abandon him, he will abandon you. And then the prophet remembered the dark past of the people, times when Israel was without the true God, without priest, without law, days of spiritual darkness, where nations collided in chaos and no one had rest. But even so, whenever the people turned to the Lord in the midst of affliction, he heard and helped, and finished with an encouragement. Be strong. Do not let your hands weaken, because your work will be rewarded. Those words ignited something in Asa. The king rose with new courage and continued the purification of the kingdom. He removed the disgusting idols from all the land of Judah and Benjamin, and also from the cities that he had conquered in the hills of Ephraim. He cleaned as far as the borders allowed and did not stop there. He restored the altar of the Lord before the temple, the altar of sacrifices that had been neglected, then summoned all the people, men of Judah, of Benjamin, and even many of Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon, who had joined him, because they saw that the Lord, the true God, was with him. At that moment, In the 3rd month of the 15th year of the reign, the whole people gathered in Jerusalem for a solemn event. They offered to the Lord an enormous sacrifice, hundreds of oxen and thousands of sheep from the spoil they had conquered. And there, with lifted hands and committed heart, they made a pact. We will seek the Lord, the God of our fathers, with all our heart and with all our soul. The oath was public and deep and so serious that it was established. Whoever did not seek the Lord should die, whether small or great, man or woman. The people shouted with joy to the sound of trumpets and horns, a celebration with spiritual weight, a national consecration. The Lord heard and gave peace on all sides. Asa took his faithfulness even further. He deposed Maacah, his grandmother, from the position of queen mother, because she had made an idolatrous sacred pole. He destroyed her idol, reduced it to dust, and burned it in the valley of Kidron, even though the idolatrous altars on the hills had not yet been completely eliminated. The heart of Asa was totally dedicated to the Lord for all his life. He brought to the temple the sacred objects, both those he himself had consecrated and those his father had separated. Silver, gold, sacred utensils, everything was restored. And in the final days of that chapter, there was peace. 36 years had passed since Asa assumed the throne. The king who had begun with reforms, prayer, and alliances with heaven, now would face a political challenge and a test of heart. Baasha, king of Israel, invaded Judah and began to fortify Ramah, a city strategically positioned near Jerusalem. His objective was clear: to isolate Judah, control commercial routes, and suffocate the kingdom of Asa. But this time, Asa did not cry out to God. Instead, he went to the temple, but not to pray. He took the silver and gold from the treasures of the house of the Lord, and also from his own palace, and sent everything as a gift to Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, who ruled in Damascus. The message was clear. Let us make a pact. Break your alliance with Baasha so that he retreats. Ben-Hadad accepted the bribe and acted quickly. He sent his armies against the cities of the north of Israel: Ijon, Dan, Abel-Maim, and several cities of Naphtali. The pressure worked. Baasha interrupted the fortification of Ramah and retreated. Asa then took advantage, gathered all the people of Judah, went to Ramah, and took away all the stones and wood that Baasha had used in the construction. With this material, he strengthened Geba and Mizpah, cities around. It seemed like a victory, until the seer Hanani appeared. He came with a harsh word. You trusted in the king of Syria instead of trusting in the Lord, your God. That is why you lost the opportunity to defeat the Syrians. Were not the Ethiopians and the Libyans an immense army? And the Lord delivered them into your hands. For the eyes of the Lord pass through all the earth, looking to show himself strong to those whose heart is totally his. But you acted like a fool, and because of that, from now on, there will be war. Asa did not like the reprimand. He did not humble himself. He became angry, ordered Hanani to be imprisoned, and also oppressed part of the people at that time. The king was no longer the same. The text then advances to the last days of Asa. In the 39th year of his reign, he was struck by a grave disease in his feet. But even sick, he did not seek the Lord. He trusted only in the doctors. 2 years later, he died. He was buried with honor in Jerusalem, in a tomb dug by himself. They placed upon him perfumes, spices, and a great bonfire in his honor. After the death of Asa, his son Jehoshaphat assumed the throne of Judah. From the beginning, it was clear. Jehoshaphat was not like the kings of neighboring nations. He did not want to follow the path of the divided kingdom of the north. nor imitate the corrupted cults of Israel. His heart was firm in the Lord, the God of his father David. He not only avoided idols, he removed them. He cleaned the kingdom of the pagan altars and the sacred poles scattered throughout Judah. Because of this, the Lord confirmed the kingdom in his hands. All Judah recognized his authority and brought gifts. And Jehoshaphat prospered. But his greatness was not measured only by gold and tributes. He strengthened his faith and also reinforced the security of the kingdom. The king began to build fortresses and store cities throughout the territory. He established military garrisons in the cities of Judah and command bases in the regions that Asa, his father, had conquered in Ephraim. But what Jehoshaphat did next was different from everything that any king of Judah had done until then. In the 3rd year of his reign, he commissioned a special group, 5 palace officials, 9 Levites, and 2 priests. They had a mission to take the law of the Lord to all the people. They went out through all the cities of Judah, teaching the people with the book of the law of God in hand. It was not just government. It was national discipleship, a spiritual reform from the inside out. And God honored this. The fear of the Lord fell upon neighboring kingdoms. No nation dared to attack Judah. Even the Philistines, old enemies of Israel, brought tributes. The Arabians also came delivering flocks of rams and goats in large quantities. Jehoshaphat strengthened himself even more. His name grew, his influence spread. He built more fortresses, towers and store cities, and organized the army with military rigor. The chapter ends with an impressive register, an enormous army, divided by tribes and commanders, ready to defend the kingdom from Judah alone. 300,000 men commanded by Adnah. There were also commanders with 280,000, 200,000 and others. From Benjamin came archers and shield-bearers equally prepared. Everyone was under the direct command of the king, established with wisdom in the fortresses of Judah. It was an armed kingdom, yes, but sustained by fear of God and teaching of the word. Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, was in a moment of strength and stability. His kingdom was respected, his faith admired, but then he made a bold and dangerous decision. He allied himself with Ahab, king of Israel. This alliance came through a marriage between royal families, sealing a political union between Judah and the kingdom of the north. And sometime later, Jehoshaphat went to visit Ahab in Samaria. The banquet was grand. Ahab sacrificed sheep and oxen in abundance. Honors, receptions, smiles, and after the abundant table came the true invitation. Jehoshaphat, come with me. Let us wage war against Ramoth-Gilead. The land is ours by right. The Syrians took it, and I want to take it back. Jehoshaphat was a man of God and did not say yes immediately. Instead, he responded, I will go with you. We are like one. But consult first the word of the Lord. Ahab gathered 400 prophets. All said what the king wanted to hear. Go, God will deliver Ramoth-Gilead into your hands. But Jehoshaphat felt that something was not right and asked, Is there not here any more prophet of the Lord so that we can consult him? Ahab responded with a sigh, There is one, Micaiah, son of Imlah. But I hate him because he never prophesies what is good about me, only disaster. Dr. Jehoshaphat insisted, and Ahab reluctantly ordered Micaiah to be called. Meanwhile, the prophets continued their staging. One of them, Zedekiah, made horns of iron and declared with theatricality, With these you will strike the Syrians until you destroy them. A messenger went to Micaiah, and, before even taking him before the king, tried to persuade him. All the prophets said good things. May your word be like theirs. But Micaiah responded, I will speak only what the Lord tells me before the king. Micaiah began with irony. Go up. You will win. Ahab noticed the tone and demanded, How many times must I make you swear that you speak only the truth in the name of the Lord? Then Micaiah spoke seriously. I saw all Israel scattered through the mountains like sheep without a shepherd. The Lord said, These have no master. Let each one return in peace to his home. Ahab turned to Jehoshaphat. Did I not tell you? He only prophesies disaster. But Micaiah went deeper. He revealed a celestial vision. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne and all the army of heaven around him. And the Lord asked, Who will deceive Ahab so that he goes up to Ramoth-Gilead and dies there? One spirit said, I will go and be a spirit of lies in the mouth of all his prophets. And the Lord said, You will deceive him. Go and do this. Silence. The court was in shock. Zedekiah, furious, slapped Micaiah on the face. Since when did the Spirit of the Lord pass from me to speak to you? Micaiah responded, You will know that on the day you are hiding from room to room. Ahab ordered Micaiah to be imprisoned with rationed bread and water until his return from the battle. But Micaiah shouted as he was being taken, If you return in peace, the Lord has not spoken through me. Listen well, all of you. Even so, Jehoshaphat went with Ahab to the war. Ahab, suspicious of the prophecy, tried a trick. He went disguised while Jehoshaphat wore royal clothes. He thought that if hidden, he would escape his destiny. But the king of Syria had ordered his war chariots. Do not fight against anyone, only against the king of Israel. When they saw Jehoshaphat in royal attire, they thought it was Ahab and surrounded him. Jehoshaphat cried out, and God delivered him. The Syrians noticed that it was not the king of Israel and pulled away. Then, a Syrian archer at random fired an arrow, without knowing who he was aiming at. He hit Ahab between the joints of the armor, gravely wounded. The king was taken from the battle, but remained standing in the chariot until nightfall. At sunset, he died. Jehoshaphat returned home alive, after having marched beside Ahab in a cursed war. After almost having died for dressing as king while Ahab hid, he now returned to Jerusalem in peace. But peace on the outside did not exactly reflect what was inside. At the entrance of the city, someone waited for him. Jehu, son of Hanani, the seer. The greeting did not come with honors nor blessings. It came with confrontation. Should you help the wicked and love those who hate the Lord? Because of that, the wrath of the Lord fell upon you. The truth cut like a sword. Jehoshaphat had joined forces with a wicked king, and this would not go unnoticed. But the word of Jehu was not only judgment. However, there are good things in you, because you took away the sacred poles from the land and prepared your heart to seek God. Jehoshaphat listened and acted. He did not remain paralyzed by shame. Instead, he went out again among the people, going from Beersheba to the mountainous region of Ephraim, visiting city by city, summoning everyone to return to the Lord, the God of their fathers. He did not remain just with words. He reformed the judicial system of the kingdom, established judges in all the fortified cities of Judah, and gave them a clear order. Be careful in what you do. You do not judge in the name of men, but in the name of the Lord. He is with you when you give a sentence. Therefore, be honest, incorruptible, upright, because with the Lord our God there is no injustice, nor partiality, nor bribery. In Jerusalem, Jehoshaphat also set up a supreme court with priests, Levites, and chiefs of the families of Israel, in charge of judging more complex cases, both civil and religious. To the spiritual leaders, he gave the responsibility over the affairs of the Lord, to the civil officials affairs of the king, and said to all, "Proceed with faithfulness, integrity of heart, and with fear of the Lord. May the fear of God be upon you in everything you do." Thus, the spiritual and administrative reform of Jehoshaphat went deeper, bringing justice and reverence to every corner of Judah. Everything was in order in the kingdom of Jehoshaphat. Justice had been restored. The people sought God. The Levites taught the law, and then came the threat. A messenger arrived breathless at the palace. "A great army is coming against you, from the children of Moab, of Ammon, and of the Munites. They are already in En-Gedi." It was an unexpected coalition. An avalanche of enemies marching rapidly from the other side of the Dead Sea, straight to Judah. Jehoshaphat was afraid. But what he did with the fear changed everything. He proclaimed a fast in the whole kingdom, from all the cities. The people of Judah gathered in Jerusalem to seek the Lord. Men, women, children, a multitude before the temple. Jehoshaphat went up and before all prayed in a loud voice, "O Lord, God of our fathers, are you not God in the heavens? Do you not rule over all the kingdoms of the nations? In your hands there is strength and power, and no one can resist you. By chance did you not drive out the inhabitants of this land before Israel? And now, these peoples that we spared, Moab, Ammon, and those of Mount Seir, come to repay us by invading our land. Lord, we do not know what to do, but our eyes are set on you." And there they remained in silence, all Judah, including infants at the breast, waiting for an answer from heaven. It was then that the Spirit of the Lord came upon a Levite named Jahaziel, in the middle of the assembly. He rose and spoke with authority. "Do not fear, nor be frightened because of this numerous army, for the battle is not yours, but of God. Tomorrow go down against them. You will not need to fight. Just take position, stand still, and see the deliverance of the Lord." The people fell with their faces to the ground. Jehoshaphat prostrated himself. The Levites rose and began to praise in a loud voice, even before the battle happened. The following morning, the army of Judah marched, but at the front of the warriors, Jehoshaphat placed the singers. That is right, men dressed in holy clothes singing, "Give thanks to the Lord, because his mercy endures forever." And while they sang, God set invisible ambushes against the enemies. The armies of Ammon and Moab turned against those of Mount Seir and destroyed them. After that, they turned against each other. When Judah arrived at the observation point in the desert, all they saw were bodies fallen on the ground. No enemy escaped. The army of Jehoshaphat spent 3 days plundering the camps. Gold, silver, clothes, weapons. So much spoil that they could barely carry it. On the 4th day, they gathered in the valley of Berakah, the valley of blessing, to thank the Lord. From there they returned to Jerusalem with joy, playing harps, lyres, and trumpets, going up to the temple as a procession of victory. The fear of the Lord fell upon the nations around. Jehoshaphat reigned in peace. God had fought for him. Jehoshaphat died and was buried with honor among the kings of Judah in the city of David. His son Jehoram assumed the throne. But soon, in the first steps of his reign, it became clear that Jehoram was not like his father. Jehoshaphat had left several children: Azariah, Jael, Zechariah, Azariah, another, Michael, and Shephatiah. To all these, besides wealth and fortified cities, he gave protection. But the throne he delivered to Jehoram, because he was the firstborn. And when Jehoram consolidated his power, he killed all his brothers. Yes, his own brothers, one by one, and also ordered the execution of some of the princes of Judah. It was the type of reign that began with blood and would continue like that. Jehoram was 32 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 8 years in Jerusalem and followed the steps of King Ahab of Israel, not those of David or Jehoshaphat. This because he had married one of the daughters of Ahab, and with her brought to Judah idolatry, corruption, political cruelty. He abandoned the Lord and took Judah with him. But even so, God did not destroy Judah for love of the covenant made with David. A promise still sustained the story. A lamp would remain lit. Even so, judgment began to knock on the doors. In the days of Jehoram, the Edomites rebelled against Judah and proclaimed a king of their own. Jehoram went there with his commanders, but although he tried to surround and attack, he could not control the revolt. The Edomites remained free since then. The city of Libnah also rebelled, because the king had abandoned the God of his fathers, while the kingdom became unstable. Jehoram continued to raise pagan altars, to corrupt the people, to take Judah far from the Lord. It was then that a letter arrived from the prophet Elijah, a cold, direct, fatal letter. Thus says the Lord, God of David, your father. You did not walk in the ways of Jehoshaphat, nor of Asa, but followed the kings of Israel, killed your brothers better than you. Therefore, the Lord will strike hard your people, your children, your wives, and your own life, and you will be struck by a disease in the intestines so severe that they will come out of you. And everything began to happen. The Lord awakened against Jehoram the Philistines and the Arabians who lived near the Ethiopians. They invaded Judah, entered the palace, took all the assets they found, took his wives and children, all, except one, Jehoahaz, the youngest. And after that came the final sentence. Jehoram was attacked by an incurable disease in the intestines. It worsened for 2 years. His suffering was intense, slow, lonely. Finally, the intestines came out of his body, and he died in terrible pain. There was no mourning in Judah. The people did not honor him when he died. He was buried in the city of David, but not in the tomb of the kings. With the death of Jehoram, the people of Jerusalem made his youngest son, Ahaziah, king. All the older brothers were already dead, taken by the Arabian invaders, and so, at 42 years old, some translations say 22, according to other sources, Ahaziah rose to the throne and reigned only 1 year in Jerusalem. But in 1 year he caused enough damage to be remembered for centuries. Ahaziah followed the steps of the house of Ahab, king of Israel. And this was not by chance. His mother, Athaliah, was daughter of Ahab, and she was the one who influenced him, leading him to evil, under the influence of his mother and corrupt advisors linked to the house of Israel. Ahaziah distanced himself completely from the Lord, and his ruin began when he got involved with King Jehoram of Israel, son of Ahab, his relative and ally. The two kings went together to war against Hazael, king of Syria, in Ramoth-Gilead. During the battle, Jehoram was wounded. He returned to Jezreel to recover, and Ahaziah went there to visit him. But this visit would become the final trap. Meanwhile, the Lord was raising Jehu, son of Nimshi, to exterminate the house of Ahab and Ahaziah, without knowing that he was entering a web of judgment, was involved in this coup of divine justice. Jehu killed Jehoram, and when the officials of Judah found Ahaziah, who was hiding, they took him to Jehu. He was killed too and buried, for they said, He was the grandson of Jehoshaphat, who sought the Lord with all his heart. But the chaos did not end there. When Athaliah, mother of Ahaziah, knew of the death of the son, she assumed the throne on her own account, and for this ordered the killing of all the royal descendants, her own grandchildren, eliminating any legitimate heir to the throne. But one child escaped. Joash, son of Ahaziah, was hidden by his aunt Jehoshaphat, daughter of the king and wife of the priest Jehoiada. She hid him in the temple of the Lord for 6 years, far from the eyes thirsty for power of Athaliah, who now ruled over Judah. 6 years. This was the time in which Joash, legitimate heir to the throne of Judah, remained hidden inside the temple, far from the vengeful eyes of his grandmother, Athaliah, the usurper queen, who ruled with an iron fist and a cold heart. But in the 7th year, something began to move behind the scenes of the priesthood. Jehoiada, the high priest and husband of Jehoshaphat, the woman who had hidden Joash when a baby, understood that the time of restoration had arrived. He was not a warrior, but had faith, strategy, and courage. Jehoiada summoned captains of the army, Levites and leaders of the families of Judah in secret, made sacred alliances with them in the temple, and right there revealed what many no longer expected. The son of the king is alive and he must reign. A plan was traced, meticulous, risky, on that Saturday, with the movement in the temple at full steam. Jehoiada organized the Levites and the guards in strategic positions. Some protected the king, others the entrances, others the surroundings of the altar. No one could enter the temple without being purified. No one could leave there without knowing the risk they ran. And then, in the middle of the sacred patio, before the eyes of the soldiers and the faithful people, they brought the boy Joash, placed the crown upon his head, delivered to him a copy of the law, anointed him, and shouted, "Long live the king!" The sound ran like fire through the streets. The gates of the city echoed with voices of celebration. Athaliah heard, to the sound of the trumpets of the people acclaiming the new king. She went running to the temple, and when she saw the boy surrounded by the leaders, by the guards, and by the people in jubilation, she shouted in despair, "Treason! Treason!" One, but there was no more room for her there. Jehoiada gave the order, "Take her out of the temple. Whoever follows her dies together. Do not kill her here in this holy place." They took Athaliah to the entrance of the royal cavalry, and there she was executed, with the fall of the queen. Jehoiada did not lose time. He re-established the alliance between the Lord, the king, and the people, all together, with one heart. They affirmed again Judah as the people of the living God. The people ran to the temple of Baal, the idol that had been introduced by Athaliah and her pagan lineage, and tore it down stone by stone. They destroyed the altars, the images, and killed the priest of Baal. Jehoiada organized the priests and Levites to resume the service in the temple. According to the order of David, choirs, offerings, sacrifices, everything returned to its place. And then, with the guards protecting each step, they took the little Joash to the royal palace, and he sat on the throne. All the people rejoiced, and Jerusalem had peace. Joash was 7 years old when he became king. 7, and even so young, he began his reign with a rare advantage. He had by his side Jehoiada, the high priest, the man who had protected, anointed, and guided him since childhood, while Jehoiada was alive. Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. With his heart turned to adoration, Joash took an important decision. "Let us restore the temple of the Lord. It is worn out, forgotten, neglected. The temple, once glorious, was in ruins. Abandoned during the dark days of Athaliah and profaned by the cults to Baal, Joash mobilized the priests and Levites to go through the cities of Judah, collecting offerings for the reconstruction work. But time passed, and nothing was done. Then, Joash confronted Jehoiada. "Why did you not demand that the Levites bring the contribution? The temple needs to be restored." There was a reason. The royal family itself, descendant of Athaliah, had diverted resources from the temple for years. It was as if the sacred had been pillaged. Before this, the king ordered a collection chest to be made, a large safe placed next to the gate of the temple, where the people could bring their offerings directly to the Lord, and it worked. All the people of Judah came with joy. Day after day, the chest filled up. When it was full, the scribes and officials of the king would empty the chest and bring the amount collected, and so the work restarted with full strength. Artisans, carpenters, masons, blacksmiths, all worked side by side. Tools hit, chisels cut, woods were fitted, and the temple came back to life. Everything was restored according to the original patterns, with zeal and reverence. When the work ended, there was still money left. With it, they made utensils of gold and silver for the services of the temple, recipients for offerings, sacred instruments. Worship was restored, and sacrifices and praises returned to fill the house of the Lord in the days of Jehoiada. But then Jehoiada died. He lived until 130 years old, one of the most respected men in the history of Judah, and was buried together with the kings. Although he had never been king, such was his honor. And with his death, the heart of Joash changed. Princes of Judah approached the young king. They flattered, cajoled, and soon the pagan altars returned to be raised. The people began to worship in sacred poles and idols, abandoning the temple that had just been restored. The Lord, patient, sent prophets to warn them, call the people back, but they did not want to listen. Then came one last voice. Zechariah, son of Jehoiada, stood up in the middle of the people and said with courage, "Thus says God, because you transgress the commandments of the Lord, therefore you will not prosper. You abandoned the Lord, therefore he also will abandon you." The response: they ordered Zechariah to be killed, stoned him in the patio of the temple. And Joash, the king that Jehoiada had raised like a son, did not move a finger to stop him. Zechariah died, saying, "May the Lord see this and judge." And judgment did not delay. At the turn of the year, an army from Syria, small, marched against Judah, even with fewer soldiers. The Lord delivered into their hands a people who had corrupted themselves. The Syrians invaded Jerusalem, killed leaders, and plundered the kingdom. Joash was gravely wounded, and it was in his bed of sickness that the vengeance of blood came. 2 of his own servants, close men, conspired and assassinated him in his bed as vengeance for the death of Zechariah, the son of the priest. Joash was not buried in the tomb of the kings. His reign ended as a tragedy, and his son Amaziah assumed the throne in his place. Amaziah, son of Joash, assumed the throne of Judah at 25 years old and reigned for 29 years in Jerusalem. From the beginning it was clear. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, but not with all his heart. Even so, he began with justice. When he consolidated his power, he executed the officials who had assassinated his father, but spared their children, obeying the law of Moses, which prohibited the punishment of children for the sins of the fathers. After that, Amaziah turned his attention to the battlefield. He gathered an army, 300,000 men of Judah, all trained and armed, but thought it was not enough. So, he hired 100,000 soldiers from Israel, powerful mercenaries, bought for 100 talents of silver. It was in this moment that a man of God appeared. "O king, do not let the army of Israel go with you. The Lord is not with Israel, not with this rebellious people of the north. If you insist, you will be defeated. Even if you fight with courage, God can give victory and can take it away." Amaziah was uncomfortable, and the money that I already paid, and the prophet responded with firmness, "The Lord can give you much more than that." The king listened and even reluctantly sent the mercenaries back, which left them furious. They returned to Israel full of hatred, and vengeance would come later. Meanwhile, Amaziah went to war against the Edomites and won. He killed 10,000 soldiers in the Valley of Salt. He captured 10,000 more and threw them from a cliff, crushing them on the rocks. It was an immense victory, but what he did after was absurd. Amaziah brought home the gods of the Edomites, set up altars for them, bowed before them and burned incense to them. Yes, the same God who had given him the victory. He rejected and the defeated idols. He started to worship. God sent another prophet. "Why are you seeking the gods of a people that you just defeated? These gods could not save even their own followers." Amaziah did not like it. "Who made you advisor to the king? Stop speaking before you are killed." The prophet went silent, but before launched the sentence, "I know that God has already decided to destroy you, because you rejected his advice and bowed before idols." But Amaziah was blinded by arrogance. After defeating Edom, he sent a bold message to Joash, king of Israel. "Come, let us face each other face to face." Joash responded with a parable. A thorn bush of Lebanon sent to say to the cedar, "Give your daughter as wife to my son." But a wild animal came and stepped on the thorn bush. "You defeated Edom, great, but now you are exalting yourself. Stay at home, do not seek trouble or you will fall." Amaziah ignored the warning and marched for war. The army of Israel came with full strength, and in Beth Shemesh, territory of Judah, the two kingdoms collided. Judah was defeated. Amaziah was captured. The walls of Jerusalem were torn down. The treasures of the temple and the palace were plundered. Hostages were taken to Samaria. Later, Amaziah was released and reigned still some years, but the people conspired against him. He fled to Lachish, but was pursued and assassinated right there. The body was brought back on a horse and buried in Jerusalem, in the city of David. After the death of Amaziah, all the people of Judah united and chose his son Uzziah as new king. He was only 16 years old when he rose to the throne, and soon something striking stood out in his reign. While Uzziah sought God, God made him prosper, and who guided him spiritually was Zechariah, a man who had the gift of discerning the visions of God. During the first years of reign, Uzziah grew in strength, wisdom, and influence. He reconquered territories of the Philistines, tore down the walls of cities like Gath, Jabneh, and Ashdod, built new fortresses, and established military control in the retaken regions. The Ammonites became his vassals, paying tribute. The name of Uzziah echoed even in Egypt. He was known, respected, and feared. But Uzziah was not just a warrior. He was builder, organizer, administrator, and innovator. He fortified Jerusalem, raised towers on the walls, on the corners, on the doors, and in the valleys. Also built cisterns in the desert to sustain his cattle. For he loved agriculture, planted vineyards, took care of fields. Uzziah organized the kingdom like few kings before him. His army was impressive, more than 300,000 men ready for war, well-armed, well-trained, led by brave officials. He provided shields, spears, helmets, breastplates, bows, and even slings to throw stones. But the high point of his inventiveness was the creation of war machines. Yes, catapults and towers with engines designed by specialists to launch arrows and large stones from the walls. A military advance ahead of his time. The fame of Uzziah spread very far. He became extremely powerful, but then came the turning point. When he was strong, his heart was exalted. Uzziah started to think of himself above the law, above the order, above the limits given by God. So, one day, he entered the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar, something that only the priest's descendants of Aaron could do. The high priest Azariah and 80 brave priests entered after him. They confronted the king right there in the sanctuary. Uzziah, it does not suit you to burn incense to the Lord. This is the function of the consecrated priests. Leave the sanctuary, for you are transgressing, and this will not bring you honor before God. Uzziah became furious. He held the incense burner in his hand. But before he could respond, leprosy appeared on his forehead right there in the presence of all before the altar. The priests saw it and rushed him out, and he himself went out running, knowing that judgment had fallen upon him. From that day on, he lived isolated in a separate house. As a leper, he was removed from the palace, prevented from entering the temple. His son Jotham started to rule as co-regent, assuming the affairs of the kingdom while he lived distanced. When he died, he was not buried with the kings, but in an adjacent field with an inscription that said, "Leper." After the death of Uzziah, who assumed the throne of Judah, was his son Jotham. He was 25 years old when he began to reign and stayed on the throne for 16 years. Different from his father, Jotham did not exalt himself, and, unlike many kings before him, he did not touch what was sacred. He respected the limits. He never entered the temple. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, following the example of Uzziah while he walked correctly. The people, however, still corrupted their ways, a stain that the king, despite being just, could not remove completely. Jotham was more discreet than his predecessors, but he was not passive. He fortified the wall of the temple, building high gates at the entrance, a kind of monument to the reverence he held for the house of the Lord. Also expanded the walls of the city, built cities in the mountainous region of Judah, strengthened fortresses and towers in the woods, and consolidated the infrastructure of the kingdom. Politically, he subjugated the Ammonites, and for 3 consecutive years, they paid him a heavy tribute, 100 talents of silver, 10,000 measures of wheat, and 10,000 of barley every year. All this because Jotham firmed himself more and more, not by the number of armies, nor by military alliances, but because he walked firmly before the Lord, his God. When he died, he was buried with honor in the city of David, and his son Ahaz rose to the throne. Ahaz was only 20 years old when he assumed the throne of Judah. He reigned for 16 years in Jerusalem. But unlike his father, Jotham, and so many just kings before him, Ahaz did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. He followed the ways of the kings of Israel, the kings of the north, who had deviated completely, but went further. He built images of metal for the Baals, offered sacrifices in the fire. Yes, he burned his own children as an offering to pagan gods, following the detestable customs of the peoples that God had driven out before the children of Israel. Ahaz sacrificed and burned incense on the high places, on the hills and under every leafy tree. The cult to the Lord was exchanged for blatant pagan rituals. It was darkness in Judah, and then judgment came. The Lord delivered Ahaz into the hands of the king of Syria. They invaded Judah, defeated the army, and took a great multitude as prisoners to Damascus. Soon after, Pekah, king of Israel, also came with full strength. He killed 120,000 soldiers of Judah in a single day, all brave men. Why? Because they had abandoned the Lord. Among the dead was Maaseiah, son of the king, and 2 of the main officials of the palace. The blow was brutal. And besides that, Israel captured 200,000 people of Judah, women, children, and daughters, and took much spoil, taking everything to Samaria. But then something surprising happened. A prophet of the Lord named Oded rose up in Samaria and confronted the army of Israel. You defeated Judah because God delivered them into your hands. But now you intend to make these brothers your slaves. You also sinned against the Lord. Let these prisoners return before the wrath of the Lord falls upon you. And surprisingly, the leaders of Ephraim listened. The chiefs of the tribe rose against the army, saying, "Do not bring these captives here. This will only increase our guilt." Then, with compassion and perhaps fear, the Israelites freed the prisoners, gave them clothes, sandals, food, water, olive oil. They took care of the wounded, placed the weak on donkeys, and took them back to Judah, as far as Jericho, in the shadow of the palm trees. Meanwhile, Ahaz continued in free fall. The Edomites attacked the south and took more prisoners. The Philistines invaded the west and took several cities of Judah. Judah was crumbling on all sides. Ahaz, desperate, asked for help from Assyria, but it was useless. Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, did not help him. In fact, he afflicted him even more. But Ahaz did not turn to God. On the contrary, the more he was crushed, the more he rebelled. He sacrificed to the gods of Damascus, saying, "They helped the kings of Syria. Maybe they help me too." But they were his ruin. Ahaz dismantled the utensils of the temple, closed the doors of the house of the Lord, built pagan altars in all the corners of Jerusalem. In each city of Judah, he raised altars to other gods, provoking the Lord to the limit. And when he died, he was not buried among the kings. His body was buried, but without honor, and his son Hezekiah assumed the throne. Hezekiah was only 25 years old when he rose to the throne of Judah. He inherited a devastated kingdom, spiritually sunken, after the dark reign of his father, Ahaz. The temple was closed, the altars profaned, the cult to the Lord practically extinct. But unlike his father, Hezekiah decided to do what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and he did not lose time. In the first month of his reign, he opened the doors of the temple, which were locked for years, and restored them. Next, he summoned the priests and Levites and gathered them in the eastern plaza before everyone. Hezekiah spoke with frankness. "Hear me, Levites, sanctify yourselves now. Sanctify the house of the Lord, the God of your fathers. Remove all impurity from this sacred place. Because our fathers were unfaithful, abandoned the Lord, closed the doors of the temple, extinguished the lamps, stopped burning incense and offering burnt offerings. Therefore, the wrath of the Lord came upon Judah and Jerusalem. But I am determined to make a covenant with the Lord, so that his wrath turns away from us." Hezekiah summoned the Levites by name, leaders of the families, musicians, guards, and servants of the temple, and they obeyed immediately. They began to sanctify the temple, gathered their brothers, purified themselves and started the meticulous cleaning of the house of the Lord. They removed everything that was impure, item by item, taking the contaminated objects to the valley of Kidron, outside the city. It was 8 days just cleaning the atriums, then 8 more to purify the interior of the temple. On the 16th day of the first month, they returned to Hezekiah and declared, "Everything is purified, O king, the altar of the burnt offering, the table of the bread of the presence, all the utensils, everything was sanctified according to the order of the Lord." The next day, Hezekiah gathered the leaders of the city and went to the temple with sacrifices. They took 7 young bulls, 7 rams, 7 lambs and 7 goats to represent the offering of repentance in the name of the whole kingdom. Judah, the sanctuary, and Israel. The priests slaughtered the animals and sprinkled the blood on the altar. Hezekiah ordered the Levites to play trumpets and instruments of David, and the songs began to fill the restored temple. While the burnt offerings were offered, the king and the whole assembly prostrated themselves in adoration. Hezekiah then declared, "Now that you have consecrated yourselves to the Lord, bring offerings and sacrifices of gratitude." The people responded. Men and families came bringing voluntary sacrifices, burnt offerings, oxen and sheep in abundance. There was so much sacrifice that the priests could not handle everything alone. Then the Levites helped them to bone, cut, prepare, until everything was consumed on the altar. On that day, the temple that was closed and dark returned to shine with fire, songs, and prayer. The house of the Lord was restored in just 16 days, and joy filled Jerusalem. After restoring the temple, Hezekiah wanted more than clean walls and resumed songs. He wanted a people reconciled with God, and there was a symbol for this: the Passover. It had been years since the people of Judah, and much more those of Israel, had celebrated the Passover as they should, with reverence, unity, and faithfulness. So, Hezekiah decided to bring back the greatest celebration of the covenant. But there was a problem. It was not time. The Passover should be celebrated in the first month, but the priests were still purifying themselves. Many of the Levites were also not ready yet, and the people were not prepared. For this, the king, together with the leaders, took a courageous decision: celebrate the Passover in the second month, an exception allowed in the law for those who were impure or distant. So, messengers were sent throughout the kingdom, from Beersheba to Dan, from Judah to Ephraim and Manasseh, summoning everyone, children of Israel, turn to the Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. He will also turn to you. Do not be like your fathers and brothers who were unfaithful. The Lord is compassionate. If you turn to him, he will not reject you. The letters were read through the cities, and the reactions were diverse. Some mocked, laughed, despised the invitation, but others humbled themselves. Men of Asher, Manasseh, and Zebulun, even in the middle of the decadence of the kingdom of the north, came to Jerusalem in Judah. God touched the hearts. The people responded with unity and joy. And so, in the second month, a multitude gathered in Jerusalem, one of the biggest feasts since the times of Solomon. They removed the pagan altars from the city, destroyed all, and then, on the 14th day, they celebrated the Passover. Now there was another detail. Many of the people were impure, had not followed all the rites required by the law. But Hezekiah interceded for them, saying, "Lord, you who are kind, forgive everyone who is seeking you with heart, even if they are not ceremonially pure." And the divine response was clear. The Lord heard Hezekiah and healed the people. The feast lasted 7 days. 7 days of music, praise, food, communion, sacrifices and gratitude. The Levites and priests sang with strength. The people brought offerings with heart, and the joy spread like fire. When it ended, it did not end. "Let us do 7 more days," they said, and they did. Hezekiah gave to the people 1,000 young bulls and 7,000 sheep. The princes gave 1,000 young bulls and 10,000 sheep. The priests sanctified themselves in mass. The people of the north and the south worshipped as one body. Jerusalem filled with feast. Something like this had not been seen since the days of Solomon, son of David. At the end of the celebration, the Levites blessed the people, and their prayers reached the heavens, the holy dwelling of God. After that memorable Passover, something ignited in the heart of the people. They did not want only to sing praises. They wanted to live for God. And then, soon after the feast, the Israelites went out through all Judah and also through the tribes of the north, Ephraim, Manasseh, as far as Naphtali, destroying pagan altars, sacred poles, idolatrous columns, and places of false worship. They tore down everything, ground, scattered the ashes, did what not many kings had the courage to do, with the idols on the ground and the heart turned to heaven. Hezekiah reorganized the cult. He placed the priests and Levites in their turns, as was written in the law of Moses and in the instructions of David. Each group knew its function. Sacrifices in the morning and afternoon, praises, thanksgivings, burning of incense, offerings on the altar. But the king went further. He established his own sustenance for the daily service of his own assets, an example of personal devotion. After that, he summoned the people of Jerusalem and all Judah. Bring the tithes and offerings of the Lord for the sustenance of the priests, of the Levites, and of the house of God. And the people responded. They began to bring grains, wine, olive oil, honey, and all types of agricultural product. Also brought the tithe of oxen and sheep and of the consecrated assets. It was so much offering that they began to stack in piles. The piles of provisions were forming month after month. In the 3rd month they began to bring. In the 7th month, there was still more arriving. Hezekiah went to see personally. When he saw the piles of sustenance in the temple, he was amazed and blessed the people and the priests. He called the Levites and asked, "What is all this?" And Azariah, the high priest, responded with a smile on his face. "Since the people started bringing the offerings, we have eaten at will, and there is still left. The Lord blessed his people. These piles are what remained." Then Hezekiah organized depots in the temple, large rooms where the tithes and offerings were carefully stored. They took this seriously. Faithful men were chosen to administer everything, supervise, distribute, maintain order, each Levite responsible for his region, his function, his generation. And everything was done with exactitude and faithfulness. Nothing was done out of vanity. It was to sustain those who served day and night in the temple and ensure that the cult would not stop. In the end, the text says something rare and powerful. Hezekiah did all this with all his heart. He sought God with truth, order, and dedication, and everything prospered. After all this, after so much faithfulness, restoration, cult, and total dedication to the Lord, came the war. King Sennacherib of the feared Assyria invaded Judah. He conquered city after city with arrogance and brutal strength, until finally he turned his eyes to Jerusalem. Hezekiah knew that the siege was forming, but he did not despair. He gathered his commanders and officials and decided to cut the water supply outside the city. Because why give water to an enemy army? Underground channels were excavated. The famous tunnel of Hezekiah was born there, diverting the springs inside the walls. At the same time, he restored ancient walls, built others new, reinforced towers, made weapons, shields, and named captains. But Hezekiah did not arm only the army. He prepared the heart of the people. He gathered everyone in the city plaza and said with firm voice, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid of the king of Assyria, nor of his enormous army, because with him is the arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord, our God, to help us and fight our battles." And the people were strengthened with the words of the king. But the enemy did not stay silent. Sennacherib sent messengers with letters and words of blasphemy straight against the God of Israel. The Assyrian officials shouted in Hebrew from outside the walls, trying to intimidate the people of Jerusalem. "In whom are you trusting? Hezekiah is deceiving you, saying that the Lord will deliver you. No god of other nations saved their peoples from my hands. Why would yours be different?" Letters were scattered, voices were raised, doubts were sown. It was a psychological, spiritual, and military siege, but Hezekiah did not respond with propaganda. He joined the prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz, and prayed. They cried out to heaven, and heaven responded. The Lord sent an angel, and this angel entered the Assyrian camp and annihilated all the warriors, princes, and leaders. Sennacherib returned ashamed to his land, and upon entering the temple of his god, was assassinated by his own children. The threat disappeared like dust in the wind. Hezekiah was exalted before all nations. Many brought gifts, offerings, recognition, but there was still more history in those days. Hezekiah became mortally ill. He prayed, and the Lord answered him with an incredible sign, a miraculous healing and a little more time of life. But for a moment, the heart of Hezekiah was exalted. He did not respond to the blessing of God with the expected gratitude. There was wrath against him, against Judah and Jerusalem. But upon recognizing his error, Hezekiah humbled himself, and the wrath of the Lord was suspended during his days. Hezekiah was an extraordinary king, rich, respected, ingenious, built reservoirs of water, secret channels, fortresses, and prosperity. Everything he did with heart delivered to God. When he died, he was buried with honor among the kings. All Judah and Jerusalem cried for him, and then his son Manasseh reigned in his place. Manasseh was only 12 years old when he inherited the throne of his father, Hezekiah, but different from the father. He did not start well. In fact, he was the worst king that Judah ever had until that moment. He reigned for 55 years, time enough to sink the kingdom in idolatry like never before. Manasseh rebuilt the pagan altars that Hezekiah had destroyed, raised altars to the Baals, raised sacred poles, bowed before the army of the heavens, and worshipped them. But the worst was not outside the temple. It was inside, in the temple of the Lord himself, the one that God had sanctified with his name. Manasseh built altars to foreign gods. "In this place I will establish my name forever," the Lord had said. Manasseh profaned this place with his idols. He also sacrificed his children in the fire, practiced witchcraft, divination, necromancy, made and used idols, did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord, more than the peoples that the Lord had destroyed before the children of Israel. God spoke with him, sent prophets, warnings, but Manasseh did not want to listen. Then the Lord acted. The armies of Assyria invaded Judah, captured Manasseh with hooks and chains of bronze, took him humiliated to Babylon, a king of Judah, the descendant of David, treated like a chained animal. But there in the darkness of exile, something unexpected happened. Manasseh cried out to the Lord, his God, humbled himself deeply before the God of his fathers, prayed, cried, sought mercy. And God, the same God he had insulted for decades, heard, had mercy on him, brought him back to Jerusalem, restored his throne. And then Manasseh knew that only the Lord is God. The man who profaned the temple now began to repair the walls of the city, fortify towers, replace officials, and, more importantly, removed the foreign gods and the idols from the temple, threw everything out of the city, repaired the altar of the Lord, offered sacrifices of peace and gratitude, ordered that Judah serve the Lord, the God of Israel. Unfortunately, the people still offered sacrifices on the altars of the hills, but this time, only to the Lord. The end of the story of Manasseh is very different from his beginning. He died in peace, was buried in his royal house, and his son Amon reigned in his place. But what Manasseh took a whole life to learn. Amon never wanted to listen. He was 22 years old when he began to reign, reigned only 2 years, did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not humble himself like his father. On the contrary, he multiplied his guilts. His own servants conspired against him and killed him in his own house. But the people of Judah reacted, killed the conspirators, and placed on the throne his son, Josiah. Josiah was only 8 years old when he was crowned king. So young, so fragile before the responsibility. But at 16 years old, still very young, he began to seek the God of David, his ancestor. And at 20, Josiah decided that it was not enough to know the Lord. He needed to purify Judah, and that was what he did. Destroyed the pagan altars, shattered the sacred poles, tore down the carved and molten images, crushed the idols until they became dust and scattered them upon the tombs of those who had worshipped them. Yes, he profaned the altars where the false priests had burned incense. And this did not happen only in Judah. Josiah went to the cities of the north, Manasseh, Ephraim, Simeon, and Naphtali, and did the cleaning there too, purified the whole territory of Israel, as no king of Judah had done since the division of the kingdom. After this purification, at 26 years old, Josiah turned his attention to the temple. The same temple that Hezekiah had restored a century before was already again in ruins. Josiah sent officials of trust, among them Hilkiah, the high priest, to restore the house of the Lord, his God. And once more the people responded. The Levites collected voluntary offerings from all the people, both from Judah and from Israel, and brought them to Jerusalem. The work of reconstruction began with zeal. The masters of work, the Levites' musicians, the carriers, the scribes, everyone was involved. And it was during this process, in the depths of the temple, that Hilkiah found something that had been forgotten for generations. I found the book of the law of the Lord given through Moses. Hilkiah delivered the book to Shaphan, the royal scribe, and Shaphan took it to the king. Josiah heard the reading of the book, and as the words echoed, his face went somber, his spirit shaken, and then he tore his robes. The Lord is angry against us. Our fathers did not obey the words of this book. We need to know what to do. Ask the Lord for me, for the people, for the whole kingdom. And the officials went to consult a prophetess called Huldah, who lived in Jerusalem. And the word of the Lord came clear, firm and terrible. Yes, I will bring disaster upon this place and its people. Everything that is written in the book will be fulfilled. They abandoned me, burned incense to other gods. My wrath is kindled and will not be quenched. But to the king the Lord sent a different answer. However, as for you, Josiah, because your heart broke, because you humbled yourself before me, tore your robes and cried, I will hear you. You will die in peace and will not see the evil that I will bring upon this place. And then Josiah, broken and decided, gathered all the elders of Judah and of Jerusalem, went up to the temple with the priests, the Levites, and all the people, from the least to the greatest, and read in a loud voice the words of the book of the covenant. Right there in the temple, Josiah made a pact before the Lord. We will follow the Lord. We will keep his commandments with all our heart and all our soul, and made all the people also enter into this covenant. In all his days, Josiah did not let anyone deviate from the Lord, the God of their fathers. After restoring the temple and renewing the covenant with God, Josiah prepared something grand, a celebration of the Passover, as was not seen since the days of the prophet Samuel. On the 14th day of the first month, in perfect obedience to the law, the king ordered that the Passover lamb be sacrificed. And not only this, he himself offered 30,000 lambs and goats, plus 3,000 oxen from his own treasure, so that the people would have with what to celebrate. The officials and leaders of Jerusalem followed him with generosity. There were hundreds and hundreds of animals placed at the disposal for everyone: priests, Levites, leaders, families. The Levites were organized according to their divisions. The priests were at their posts. The altar smoked. It was the Passover, and Jerusalem sang again. The multitude brought their families. The Levites sacrificed the lambs, prepared the offerings. The priests sprinkled the blood, everything according to the law of Moses. The cult was alive, and the order was perfect. Sacred portions were roasted, holy portions separated, voluntary offerings prepared, from dawn until night. The Levites did not stop. The temple became again the spiritual heart of Judah, and there it is recorded. Never was a Passover celebrated like that in the days of the kings of Israel, nor during the times of Samuel, the prophet. No king celebrated like Josiah. Everything was joy, communion, adoration. But the chapter does not end in feast. Then came the unexpected conflict. Shortly after, Necho, king of Egypt, marched with his army toward the north to face the Babylonians in Carchemish, on the banks of the river Euphrates. Necho did not intend to wage war against Judah. He was only passing through the territory on the way to the greater confrontation, but Josiah decided to intercept him in Megiddo. The king of Egypt sent messengers with a warning. I have nothing against you, Josiah. I am not coming against Judah. My war is with another enemy. God himself sent me on this mission. Do not oppose him, or you will be destroyed. But Josiah did not listen. Disguised, he went out to the battlefield, and there in Megiddo was wounded by the archers, gravely wounded. He was taken from the battle. His servants placed him in another war chariot and took him to Jerusalem. Josiah died and was buried with honor among the kings of Judah. And then something broke in Jerusalem. All the people cried. Jeremiah, the prophet, wrote laments for him. The singers and singing women intoned weeping in his memory and continued singing for generations. Josiah had been the king of the reform, the king of the covenant, the king of hope, and his death marked a turning point in the destiny of the nation. After the death of Josiah, the people of Judah placed on the throne his oldest son, Jehoahaz. He was 23 years old, but reigned only 3 months in Jerusalem. The throne was short because Pharaoh Necho, the same one who had faced Josiah in Megiddo, came again. Later, Jehoahaz took him to Egypt as a prisoner and placed on the throne another son of Josiah, Eliakim, changing his name to Jehoiakim. to show who was in charge. Jehoiakim reigned for 11 years in Jerusalem, but did what was evil before the Lord, like so many kings before him. And then came the empire that would shake the world. Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched upon Judah, invaded Jerusalem, tied Jehoiakim with chains of bronze to take him captive, raised tributes, plundered the temple, took sacred objects for his own pagan palace, and, finally, placed on the throne the son of Jehoiakim, Jehoiakim or Jeconiah. But Jeconiah also lasted little, 3 months and 10 days, and also did what was evil. Nebuchadnezzar returned, took Jeconiah to Babylon, together with treasures of the temple, sacred utensils and all the nobility, and in his place placed Zedekiah, the last king of Judah. Zedekiah reigned 11 years, but did not humble himself before the word of the Lord, even being constantly warned by the prophet Jeremiah, hardened the heart, closed the ears, and led the people in the rebellion against God himself. The priests profaned the temple. The people mocked the messengers of God, despised the word of the Lord, joked about the prophets. And then the wrath of the Lord reached the point of no return. There was no more remedy. The Babylonian army invaded Jerusalem with fury. They set fire to the house of God, tore down the walls of the city, burned the palaces, destroyed everything. Whoever survived was taken captive to Babylon. Those who escaped the sword became servants of the empire, enslaved under Nebuchadnezzar and his successors, and thus were fulfilled the words of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah. The land remained desolate for 70 years, resting from the Sabbaths that the people had ignored. But the book ends with a surprising note. 70 years later, the Lord moved the heart of a pagan king, Cyrus, king of Persia, and he proclaimed, "The Lord, the God of the heavens, gave me all the kingdoms of the earth and charged me to build a temple for him in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever among you is of his people, let him go up." And so ends the Second Book of Chronicles. If you reached here, you are part of a rare group, those who not only read the Bible, but persevere to the end, even in the midst of falls and new beginnings. There were 36 chapters of kings, reforms, judgments, and mercies. Each verse reminded us that there is no firm throne outside the will of God, and that the broken heart always finds space in his story. This study was made with prayer, reverence, and responsibility, with one single purpose: to lead you back to the center, the presence of God. So, if you watched until here, comment. I reached the end of the Second Book of Chronicles, and now I know that God remains faithful even when the people fail. This comment shows that you understood what this book wants to teach us: that kings pass, empires fall, but the covenant of God remains; that the house of the Lord is more than a building. It is a place of repentance, adoration, and meeting with the Eternal. Now I invite you, like this video, share with someone who needs to remember that there is always hope of restoration, and subscribe to the channel to continue this journey through the Word. But more than any like, let this story change your inside. Second Chronicles was not written to romanticize the past, but to show that God is just, patient, and full of compassion. That even in exile he remains present, and even in dark days the promise of return. He is the God who responds to the prayer of Solomon, who hears the cry of Hezekiah, who transforms the heart of Manasseh, and who awakens pagan kings to fulfill his plans. For this I make an invitation to you: surrender, not with religiosity, but with sincerity, not with appearance, but with transformation. Let God reign over your heart, as he should reign over each king in Jerusalem. If you have not yet delivered your life to Jesus, deliver it today. Accept the true King, the King who does not pass, does not fail, does not lose battles, the King who calls us to faithfulness in all times. This story was not told just to inform. It was told to transform. Now tell me, which chapter impacted you the most? Which character taught you more about God? Which fall or which new beginning spoke to your journey? Comment here below. This was the Second Book of Chronicles, chapter by chapter, from beginning to end. I pray that it has strengthened your faith, as it strengthened mine. God bless you, and until the next study, if He allows.